In the scorching slave markets of Kyrenia, where the mighty Roman Empire trades human lives like cattle, a young barbarian woman named Lyra stands in chains. Captured from the northern tribes, she's mocked and ridiculed by the crowd for her wild appearance and fierce spirit. But when a broken, elderly slave is about to be beaten to death for sport, Lyra does the unthinkable. She declares she'll buy him herself, revealing a hidden past that will change everything. This is a story of unexpected love, sacrifice, and the discovery that sometimes the greatest strength comes from protecting those who cannot protect themselves. The noon sun blazed mercilessly over the slave market of Kyrenia, turning the dusty ground into a furnace that burned through the thin sandals of spectators. The stench of sweat, fear, and desperation hung thick in the air like a suffocating blanket. Iron chains rattled against wooden platforms as merchants displayed their human cargo, their voices competing in a cacophony of promises and prices.
Look at this one. Marcus Aurelius, the most prominent slave trader in the market, yanked a chain forward. A genuine barbarian from the northern wastes, strong as an ox, wild as a wolf. The crowd pressed closer, their faces twisted with cruel amusement, as a young woman stumbled onto the platform. She couldn't have been more than 23 winters, though the harshness of her capture had aged her face. Her hair, once probably golden like wheat fields, hung in matted tangles around her shoulders. Dirt and dried blood caked her arms, and her torn tunic barely covered her muscled frame. But it was her eyes that made some in the crowd step back, ice blue, burning with a fury that chains couldn't contain. She bit the last handler, Marcus announced with a showman's flair, and the crowd erupted in laughter. Had to knock out 2 of her teeth to teach her manner. Lyra lifted her head, and despite the gap in her smile, she grinned at the crowd. Blood had dried at the corner of her mouth, but she wore it like war paint. When she spoke, her accent was thick, her Latin broken but defiant. "You laugh," she said, her voice carrying across the square, "but I see fear in your eyes. You know what Barbarian can do." The laughter grew louder, more mocking. A well-dressed woman in silk robes pointed at Lyra's matted hair. "It looks like a bird's nest. Has she ever seen a brush? Probably eats raw meat like an animal." Someone else shouted. "Look at those scars. She must be too stupid to avoid getting hurt." Marcus let them mock her, knowing it would drive down her price. He needed to move her quickly. She'd already injured 3 of his men, and keeping her was becoming expensive. But Lyra stood straighter with each insult, her chin raised, her eyes scanning the crowd with the patience of a predator studying prey. That's when she saw him, in the corner of the platform, barely visible behind wooden crates. An elderly man sat hunched over. His hair was white as fresh snow, his body frail and trembling. Fresh welts covered his back, and his breathing came in painful, ragged gasps. He couldn't have been a fighter or a laborer, perhaps once a scholar or scribe, judging by his delicate hands. Now he was nothing but damaged goods, waiting to be disposed of. A younger slave handler, barely more than a boy himself, approached the old man with a club. "This one's taking up space," he announced to Marcus. "No one will buy him. Should we just finish him off? Make sport of it for the crowd?" The audience perked up at the promise of violence. Some began placing bets on how many strikes the old man could take before dying. Others laughed and pointed, already enjoying the show before it began. The old man looked up then, and his eyes, grey and gentle despite his suffering, met Lyra's across the platform. In that moment, something passed between them. Perhaps it was recognition of shared humanity in a place that denied it existed. Perhaps it was simply 2 souls acknowledging each other's pain. But Lyra saw something in those eyes that made her heart clench. A resignation to death, but also a flicker of the man he once was, the dignity that torture couldn't quite extinguish. The handler raised his club. "Stop!" Lyra's voice rang out across the market, powerful and commanding. The handler paused, confused. The crowd fell silent, wondering what entertainment the barbarian woman would provide now. "Don't hurt him," she declared,
her broken Latin suddenly clear as mountain water. "I'll buy him." For a heartbeat, the entire market stood frozen, as if time itself had stopped to process what had just been said. Then, like a dam bursting, laughter exploded from every corner of the square. It was the kind of laughter that bent people double, that brought tears to eyes, that made ribs ache. "The slave wants to buy a slave," someone gasped, between fits of mirth. As the sun cooked her brain completely, what will she pay with? The fleas in her hair. Marcus himself was laughing so hard he had to steady himself against a post. "My dear Barbarian," he said, wiping tears from his eyes, "slaves don't buy slaves. You own nothing. You are nothing. You are property, not a person with rights or wealth." But Lyra didn't lower her gaze. Instead, she did dim that made the laughter die in throats and smiles fade from faces. She began to sing. It wasn't a song any of them knew. It came from the far north, from lands where snow never melted and the sun barely rose in winter. The melody was haunting, beautiful, and impossibly sad. Her voice, rough from screaming and thirst, somehow made the song more powerful. It spoke of loss, of home, of warriors who died far from their hearth fires. It spoke of children who would never see their parents again, of lovers separated by distance and death. As she sang, she moved her hands in a strange pattern, and the chains that bound her wrists chimed in rhythm with her song, creating an otherworldly music that made hardened merchants stop counting their coins and cruel spectators forget their bloodlust. When the last note died away, the market was silent except for the distant cry of a baby and the whisper of wind through the awnings. "I am Lyra of the Frostwolf clan," she said into that silence. "Daughter of Thorvald the Bold, granddaughter of Astrid the Wise. I was taken in battle, yes, but I am not nothing. In my homeland, I owned 20 horses, 50 sheep, and 3 long houses. I had gold earned from raids and trade, hidden where your Roman hands will never find it." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I offer information about that gold in exchange for the old man's freedom." Marcus's eyes glittered with greed. And why would a barbarian care about one worthless old slave? Lyra looked again at the elderly man who was watching her with wonder and confusion. "Because in my land we have a saying, the gods test us not with how we treat the strong, but how we protect the weak. This man has lived long enough to have stories, wisdom, perhaps family who mourn him. His life has value beyond his use as entertainment for your bloodthirsty crowd." "Pretty words," Marcus sneered, though his tone was more calculating now. "But even if you had gold, why waste it on him? He'll die within days anyway." "Then he'll die free," Lyra replied simply. "He'll die with dignity, not as sport for those who have forgotten their own humanity." The crowd had grown quiet, uncomfortable. Some shifted restlessly, unused to having their cruelty reflected back at them so plainly. Others watched with newfound interest, sensing that something unusual was happening. The elderly man finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper that only those closest could hear. "Child, don't waste your chance at freedom on me. I'm nobody. I'm nothing." Lyra turned to him fully, and for the first time since she'd been dragged onto the platform, her fierce expression softened. "What's your name?" Gaius. My name was Gaius, not was Gaius. Your name is Gaius, and today, Gaius, you matter." Marcus was calculating now, his merchant's mind working through possibilities. "Even if I believed you about this hidden gold, how do I know you won't lie about its location once I free the old man? Because I give you my word as a warrior of the Frostwolf clan. We may be barbarians to you, but our word is iron. I break my oath, and my ancestors will curse me in the afterlife. I'll never enter the eternal hunting grounds. For my people, that fate is worse than any torture you Romans could devise." The crowd was growing restless. Some wanted blood, others were intrigued by the drama unfolding. A few had even begun to look at the old man, really look at him, and see not just a broken slave, but a human being with a story. Marcus sensed the shift in mood. He was a merchant above all, and he knew when to press an advantage. "Tell me the location of half the gold now, as proof. If my men find it, I'll consider your offer." Lyra shook her head. "Release Gaius first. Let him walk free from this platform. Then I'll tell you where to find all of it." "You're in no position to negotiate, Barbarian." "Neither are you," Lyra countered. "You could torture me, yes, but I've already survived your worst. I'll die before I speak. Or," she smiled, that gap-toothed grin that somehow made her look both feral and clever, "you can make a simple trade, one worthless old man for enough gold to buy 20 young, strong slaves." The market waited, holding its collective breath. Marcus looked from Lyra to Gaius, then to the crowd. He was caught between greed and pride, between the possibility of wealth and the humiliation of negotiating with a slave. Finally, someone in the crowd shouted, "Do it! Let's as if the barbarian speaks truth." Others took up the cry, some genuinely curious, others simply wanting to see how this strange drama would end. Marcus, ever the showman, recognized an opportunity. "Very well," he announced loudly. "Let it be known that Marcus Aurelius is a reasonable man. Release the old slave." The handlers looked confused but obeyed. They unlocked Gaius's chains, and the old man stood on shaking legs, barely able to believe what was happening. He looked at Lyra with eyes full of tears and questions. "Go," she told him gently. "Leave this place. Live." "But why?" he whispered. "Because someone should," she replied, and in those 3 words was a weight of sorrow that made even hardened hearts in the crowd feel something they'd thought long dead. Gaius stood at the edge of the platform, his legs trembling not just from weakness but from disbelief. Freedom, even for a moment, felt foreign after 2 years in chains. He turned back to look at Lyra, this fierce young woman who had just traded her only bargaining chip for his life. Their eyes met across the platform, and in that gaze, something flickered, a recognition that went deeper than the moment. "Well, Barbarian," Marcus's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "The old man is free. Now speak. Where is this gold you claim to possess?" Lyra straightened her shoulders, the chains at her wrists clanking with the movement. The crowd pressed closer, eager to hear whether this wild woman would reveal treasure or prove herself a liar. She could feel their anticipation like heat from a forge, but her eyes remained fixed on Marcus. 3 days north of the Rhine crossing, where the old Roman road meets the forest of black pines, she began, her voice carrying clearly across the silent market. "There's a burned oak tree, struck by lightning last summer. Dig beneath its roots, 5 feet down, wrapped in white wolf pelts. You'll find enough gold to make you wealthy beyond measure." Marcus studied her face, searching for signs of deception. "That's very specific for someone who was dragged here in chains. How could you have hidden gold on your journey as a captive?" "I didn't hide it on the journey," Lyra replied. "I hid it 3 moons before your soldiers came. My clan had been trading with merchants from Gaul, and I knew war was coming. The Romans always come, like locusts, devouring everything in their path. I convinced my father to hide our wealth, to preserve something for our people's future. And you just remember exactly where." Lyra's lips curved in a bitter smile. "When you bury your entire life, your whole clan's hope for survival, you don't forget where you put it. Every night in chains I've dreamed of that gold, knowing it sits useless in the earth, while my people are scattered or dead." A merchant in the crowd, wearing the rich purple that marked him as wealthy and influential, called out, "Marcus, if she's lying, you could always sell her to me afterward. I'll pay double the usual rate for a barbarian woman. My estate needs someone with fight in them." Several men laughed and made crude comments about what uses they'd have for a fierce barbarian woman. Lyra's jaw tightened, but she kept her gaze steady on Marcus. "Send your men," she said. "Send your fastest riders. They can be there and back in a week. Keep me in your deepest cell if you wish. I won't try to escape. I've given my word." Marcus was about to respond when Gaius, who had been slowly making his way down from the platform, suddenly stopped. His weathered face had gone pale, and he stared at Lyra with an expression of shocked recognition. "By the gods," he whispered, though his voice carried in the hushed market. You're her. You're the Eagle Rider." The market erupted in confused murmurs. Marcus held up a hand for silence. "What nonsense is this, old man?" Gaius turned to face the crowd, his frail body suddenly animated with excitement. "2 summers passed before I was taken. I served in the house of General Quintus Maximus. His son, barely 16, was part of a diplomatic envoy to the northern tribes. Their party was ambushed by bandits. Not barbarians, but Roman deserters turned thieves. 30 armed men against 5 diplomats and their small guard. The crowd leaned in, sensing a story worth hearing. "The boy would have died," Gaius continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Should have died, but a young barbarian woman appeared, riding a horse so fast it seemed to fly. She had been hunting eagles in the mountains, had trained her whole life in the art of mounted combat. She fought like the Furies themselves, saved the boy and 3 others, killed 12 bandits before the rest fled." Lyra's face remained impassive, but her hands clenched into fists. "General Maximus offered her anything. Gold, land, even citizenship," Gaius said, his eyes never leaving Lyra's face. "But she asked for only one thing, that Rome would respect the boundary of the Rhine for 5 more years, give her people time to prepare for the inevitable." The general agreed, gave his word before Jupiter himself. "And yet," Lyra said quietly, her voice carrying despite its softness, "Rome came in 3. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Marcus seemed taken aback by this revelation. The barbarian slave he'd been mocking wasn't just some captured savage. She was someone who had saved Roman lives, who had negotiated with generals. "Is this true?" Marcus demanded. Lyra finally looked away from Gaius to meet the trader's eyes. "Truth is a luxury slaves aren't afforded, is it not? We are what you say we are, nothing more, nothing less." "But if you saved the general's son," a woman in the crowd began. "I saved a boy," Lyra interrupted. "A frightened child who cried for his mother as bandits circled him like wolves. I didn't see a Roman or an enemy. I saw a child who needed help. Just as today, I saw an old man who hid mercy." She turned back to Gaius. "You were there, in the general's house?" Gaius nodded slowly. "I was his scribe. I wrote the letter of agreement, sealed with the general's own ring. I tried to remind him of his promise when he ordered the northern campaign. He had me whipped and sold for my impudence." The crowd was growing restless again, but now their energy had shifted. Some looked uncomfortable, others angry, though whether at Lyra or at the situation, it was hard to tell. "This changes nothing," Marcus declared, though he seemed less certain now. "A slave is a slave, regardless of past deeds. But I'll send men to check your story about the gold. If you've lied to me, barbarian, you'll wish you'd let the old man die quickly." "I haven't lied," Lyra said simply. "The gold is there." Marcus gestured to his guards. "Take her to the underground cells. No food for 3 days. Let's see if hunger loosens her tongue about any other treasures she might know of." As the guards moved to grab her, Lyra called out to Gaius one more time. "Old man, Gaius, where will you go?" Gaius looked lost, standing at the edge of the market square, with freedom he didn't know how to use. I don't know. I have nowhere, no one." "Then wait," she said even as the guards began dragging her away. "Wait for me at the temple of Minerva. 7 days. If I'm not dead, I'll find you." "Why?" Gaius asked, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "Why would you save me? I'm Roman. My people destroyed yours." Lyra smiled then, that gap-toothed grin that transformed her face from fierce to almost gentle. "You're not Roman. You're not a barbarian. You're just an old man who needed help. In the end, that's all any of us are, people who need help." The guards pulled her away, but she kept her head high as they led her through the jeering crowd. Some still mocked her, but others watched in troubled silence. The story of the Eagle Rider had unsettled them, made them see her as something more than just a savage to be tamed. As they descended into the darkness of the underground cells, Lyra heard one guard mutter to another, "Do you really think she has gold?" "Marcus seems to think so," the other replied. "And if she really is the Eagle Rider, then what? Then we're keeping a hero in chains." The first guard spat. "She's a barbarian. They don't have heroes." But even as he said it, his voice lacked conviction. The seed of doubt had been planted. The cell they threw her into was worse than anything she'd endured so far. No light penetrated the stone walls, and water dripped constantly from the ceiling, creating pools of stagnant filth on the floor. The air was thick with the stench of human waste and despair. Other slaves were kept here. She could hear their moans and whispers in the darkness, but none spoke to her. Lyra felt her way to a corner, and sat, pulling her knees to her chest. The stone was cold against her back, and she could feel things scurrying across the floor. Rats, probably, or worse. But she didn't move. She'd endured worse in the winter storms of her homeland, when hunting parties were trapped for days in ice caves, surviving on nothing but melted snow and hope. As her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she began to make out shape. In the cell across from hers, barely visible through the iron bars, was a child. A boy no more than 10, curled into a ball and whimpering softly. His captors had marked him with the brand of a thief, probably caught stealing bread or fruit. "Boy," she called softly in Latin, then tried again in Gaulish, then in her own tongue. The child stirred at the last, lifting his head. "You speak the northern tongue," he whispered back in accented but understandable words. "I am northern," she replied. "What's your name, little warrior?" "Eric. My mother called me Eric." "Where is your mother now, Eric?" "Dead. The Romans killed her when they took our village. Said she fought too hard." Lyra closed her eyes, feeling the familiar weight of loss. How many Erics were there in these cells? How many children stolen from dead mothers? How many futures destroyed for the glory of Rome? "Would you like to hear a story, Eric?" she asked. "It's dark, and stories make darkness easier to bear." "Yes," came the small voice. "Please." So Lyra began to speak, her voice soft but clear in the oppressive darkness. She told him of the great ice bears of the far north, who could swim for days without rest. She told him of the northern lights, which were the souls of warriors dancing in the sky. She told him of her grandmother, Astrid the Wise, who could speak to wolves and knew every star by name. Other prisoners began to listen. She heard them shifting closer to their bars, drawn by her voice and the escape it offered from their misery. Soon she had an audience of the condemned and forgotten, all listening to tales of a world beyond stone walls and iron chains. Hours passed, or perhaps days. It was impossible to tell in the constant darkness. Her throat grew raw from speaking, her stomach cramped from hunger, but still she told stories. When her voice finally gave out, others began to share their own. An old woman spoke of vineyards in Hispania, where the grapes grew as large as plums. A man from Africa described cities of gold hidden in the desert. Eric told them about his mother's singing, how she could calm wild horses with her voice. They were creating light with words, building a world within the darkness, where they were more than slaves, more than property. They were people with histories, with memories that no chain could bind. On what might have been the third day, heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. Torchlight blazed into their darkness, making them all shrink back, covering their eyes. Marcus appeared, flanked by guards, his face unreadable. "Bring the barbarian woman," he commanded. The guards hauled Lyra to her feet. She could barely stand, weakened by hunger and thirst. But she forced herself to walk upright. As they passed Eric's cell, she managed to brush her fingers against the bars, a small gesture of farewell and courage. They brought her up into daylight that felt like knives in her eyes. The market square was crowded again, but the atmosphere was different. There was an electric tension in the air, an anticipation that made the hair on her arms stand up despite the heat. Marcus stood on the platform, and beside him were three of his men, dusty from hard travel. At their feet lay several bundles wrapped in white wolf pelt.
"Well," Marcus addressed his men loudly, playing to the crowd. "Tell everyone what you found." One of the riders stepped forward. "We found it exactly where she said, buried beneath the lightning-struck oak, wrapped just as she described." He paused for dramatic effect. "More gold than we could carry. We brought what we could, but there's 3 times this still buried there." The crowd gasped. Marcus unwrapped one of the bundles, revealing gold coins, jewelry and worked metal that gleamed in the afternoon sun. It was a fortune by any measure. "So," Marcus said, turning to Lyra, with a calculating smile, "the barbarian told the truth. The question now is, what do we do with her?" The crowd pressed forward, eager to see what would become of the barbarian woman who had spoken truth. Lyra stood in the blazing sun, her legs trembling from 3 days without food, but her spine remained straight. The gold at Marcus's feet caught the light, sending dancing reflections across the faces of the spectators like scattered stars. "She kept her word," someone in the crowd murmured. "The barbarian kept her word." Marcus raised his hand for silence, ever the showman. "Indeed, she has provided valuable information. The question is whether this earns her freedom or merely a more comfortable cell." "You gave your word too," Lyra said, her voice hoarse but steady. "The old man goes free, and I tell you about the gold. I fulfilled my part." But you're still a slave," Marcus replied smoothly, "and a dangerous one. You've already injured my men, bitten a handler. What's to stop you from being a threat if I release you?" Before Lyra could respond, a commotion erupted at the edge of the square. The crowd parted like water before a ship's prow, and through the gap strode a figure that made even Marcus straighten. With General Quintus Maximus himself entered the market square, his purple-striped toga marking his senatorial rank, his bearing still military despite his 60 years. Behind him walked a young man of perhaps 18, handsome, well-built, with the confidence of privilege. But when the young man's eyes found Lyra, his face went white as marble. "Father," the young man whispered, though his voice carried in the sudden hush. "It's her." The general's weathered face remained impassive as he approached the platform. His eyes, dark as polished obsidian, took in everything. Lyra in chains, the gold at Marcus's feet, the crowd's eager faces. "Marcus Aurelius," the general said, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to absolute obedience. "I heard an interesting tale in the Senate baths this morning. Something about a barbarian woman claiming to be the Eagle Rider." Marcus bowed deeply. "General Maximus, what an unexpected honor." "Yes, this woman claims. She doesn't need to claim anything," the young man interrupted, stepping forward. "I'm looking at the woman who saved my life 2 years ago. Father, it's her. I'm certain of it." The crowd buzzed with excitement. This was better than any gladiator match. Drama unfolding with real consequences. General Maximus walked slowly around Lyra, studying her like a sculptor might study marble before carving. "You've lost weight," he observed, "and teeth, I see. But yes, those eyes, I remember those eyes. You killed 12 men in less than 3 minutes. My military advisors still study that battle, trying to understand your technique." "It wasn't a technique," Lyra replied. "It was desperation. Desperate people fight differently than soldiers." "Indeed." The general turned to Marcus. "What price for her?" Marcus's eyes lit with greed. "Well, General, she's proven quite valuable. The gold she revealed, her fighting skills. I asked for a price, not a speech." 5,000 denarii, Marcus said quickly, naming an outrageous sum that made the crowd gasp. The general's son, Lucius, stepped forward. "Father, please. She saved my life. She saved 3 of your men. We owe her." "We owe her nothing," the general interrupted coldly. "I gave her what she asked for.
5 years of peace for her people. It's not my fault they couldn't make proper use of that time. You gave 3 years, Lyra said quietly, not 5. The general's eyes flashed dangerously. Are you calling me a liar, slave? I'm stating a fact. You promised 5 years. You delivered 3. That's not a lie. It's a broken promise. There's a difference, though. I doubt Romans trouble themselves with such distinctions. The tension in the square grew thick as fog. Guards moved their hands to their swords, ready to strike if the general commanded it. But Lucius moved between his father and Lyra, his young face set with determination. She's right, father. You know she's right. I was there when you made that promise. You swore before Jupiter himself. Circumstances changed, the general said, but for the first time there was a hint of discomfort in his voice. The barbarian tribes were gathering, planning attacks. We had to strike first. Is that what you tell yourself? Lyra asked. That you had to destroy villages full of children and elders. That you had to burn grain stores before winter, ensuring starvation. That you had to... She stopped, her voice catching. That you had to crucify my younger brother because he tried to protect our mother's grave from being desecrated by your soldiers. The square had gone deathly quiet. Even the merchants had stopped hawking their wares, sensing that something momentous was happening. Your brother was a rebel, the general said, but his tone lacked conviction. My brother was 14 years old, Lyra replied. His name was Finn. He liked to carve wooden wolves and was afraid of thunderstorms. He died calling for our mother, who had been dead for 6 moons. She looked directly at Lucius then. He was 2 years younger than you were when I saved your life. Lucius turned to his father, his face stricken. Is this true? The general's jaw tightened. War requires difficult decisions. You're too young to understand. I'm older now than you were when you first led a legion, Lucius countered. Old enough to recognize dishonor when I see it. He turned back to Lyra. I'll buy your freedom. I have my own money, my inheritance from mother. No, a new voice called out. The crowd turned to see Gaius, the elderly man Lyra had saved, pushing his way through. He looked different, cleaner, wearing a simple but clean tunic, his wounds tended. No, young master, that's not enough. Marcus laughed. The old slave returns, come to watch your savior's fate. But Gaius wasn't looking at Marcus. He was staring at General Maximus with an expression of profound sadness. Quintus, you once told me that the measure of Rome's greatness wasn't in its ability to conquer, but in its capacity for justice. Do you remember? The general's face went rigid. You were my scribe, Gaius. Nothing more. Your opinions, I was your friend for 20 years before you had me whipped and sold. Gaius interrupted, his voice stronger than anyone had heard it. I taught your son his letters. I helped write your speeches to the Senate. I kept your secrets, including the one about how you really won the Battle of Aquilonia. The general's hand moved to his sword. Be very careful, old man. Or what? You'll have me killed? I'm already dead, Quintus. I died the day you broke your word to this young woman and invaded the north. I died again when you had me beaten for reminding you of your honor. Gaius turned to address the crowd. You want to know why she saved me? A worthless old Roman who represents everything that destroyed her people. I'll tell you why, because she has something Rome has forgotten. Humanity. He walked to the platform and, to everyone's shock, knelt before Lyra. I have no money to buy your freedom, but I have something else. He reached into his tunic and pulled out a small, sealed scroll. This is a letter I wrote before coming here, witnessed by 3 senators. It tells the true story of the Northern Campaign, the violated treaties, the massacre of civilians, the execution of children. If this becomes public, certain careers would end. Certain legacies would be forever tarnished. The general's face had gone from red to white. You wouldn't dare. I'm dying, Quintus. The beatings you gave me damaged something inside. The healers say I have perhaps a month, maybe 2. Gaius stood slowly, his aged body trembling with effort. What do I have to lose? But you have everything to lose. Your reputation, your sons, your place in history. This is blackmail, Marcus protested, sensing his profitable sale slipping away. This is justice, Gaius corrected. Release her, clear her name, give her citizenship and safe passage to wherever she wishes to go. Do this, and the letter remains sealed. The general's hand tightened on his sword hilt until his knuckles went white. The square held its breath, waiting to see if blood would be spilled. But it was Lucius who moved first. He walked to his father and gently placed his hand over the general's sword hand. "Father," he said softly, "for once, just once, do the right thing. Not the politically expedient thing, not the profitable thing, but the right thing. Be the man I thought you were when I was a child." Something broke in the general's face then, a crack in the marble facade he'd worn for so long. He looked at his son, then at Gaius, then finally at Lyra. "You could have let me die," Lucius continued. "Those bandits would have killed me, and you saved me without knowing who I was, without expecting any reward. You asked for 5 years of peace for your people, and my father gave you 3. We owe you 2 years of a life, The general closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, something had changed. "Marcus, I'll pay your 5,000 denarii. Draw up the papers." "And citizenship," Gaius pressed. "Full citizenship with all rights and protections. That requires Senate approval," the general began. "Which you can obtain with a word," Gaius interrupted. "You know you can." The general looked at Lyra then, really looked at her for the first time. "Is this what you want? Roman citizenship? The right to walk among the people who destroyed your family?" Lyra met his gaze steadily. "I want the right to choose my own path. Whether that leads to Rome or away from it should be my decision, not yours." "Father," Lucius said urgently, "please." The general turned to his son. "You'd have me humble myself before a barbarian woman. I'd have you honor yourself before a woman who honored us with mercy we didn't deserve." Lucius replied. Long moments passed. The sun beat down mercilessly and sweat trickled down faces, but no one moved. Finally the general spoke. "Draw up the papers," he told Marcus. "Freedom and citizenship. I'll have the Senate confirmation by tomorrow." The crowd erupted, some in celebration, others in outrage. The idea of a barbarian woman becoming a citizen was too much for many to accept. But Lyra wasn't listening to them. She was watching Gaius, who had quietly sat down on the edge of the platform, his strength finally failing him. As Marcus's scribes prepared the documents, she walked to the old man and knelt beside him, their positions now reversed from earlier. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why risk everything for me?" Gaius smiled, and for a moment years seemed to fall away from his weathered face. "Because you reminded me of my daughter. She died in childbirth 10 years ago. Had your spirit, your courage. When you sang that song in your language, she used to sing to her children in our native tongue. Before we became so Roman, we forgot where we came from. What was her name?" "Livia. It means life." "Ironic, isn't it?" He coughed, and blood flecked his lips. "I'm dying, young woman. Nothing they can do to me matters anymore. But you have life ahead of you. Promise me something. Anything. Live it. Not just survive, but truly live. Find happiness if you can. Find love. Have children and tell them stories of their grandmother who rode with eagles. Don't let hatred consume you the way it consumed me for so many years." Lyra took his frail hands in hers, feeling the bones beneath paper-thin skin. "I promise, Gaius, but only if you promise to fight. 1 month, 2 months, fight for every day. I'm tired of fighting, then rest and let others fight for you. You're not alone anymore." The old man's eyes filled with tears. "I've been alone for so long, I'd forgotten what kindness felt like." Marcus returned with the papers. "Sign here," he said grudgingly, clearly unhappy about losing such a valuable slave, but unable to refuse the general's gold. Lyra looked at the document, I can't write in Latin. I'll sign for you, Lucius offered, stepping forward, as your witness and as your friend, if you'll permit it. She studied him, this young Roman, who had the courage to stand against his own father. You've changed since that day with the bandits. You were a frightened boy then. I'm still frightened, Lucius admitted. Just of different things now. I'm frightened of becoming like my father, so focused on glory that I forget humanity. You taught me that, though it took me 2 years to understand the lesson. As Lucius signed the papers, General Maximus approached Lyra one final time. You have your freedom and your citizenship. We're even now. We'll never be even. Lyra replied, you can't resurrect my brother or rebuild my village, but perhaps your son can build a different Rome, one that doesn't need to destroy everything it doesn't understand. The general said nothing, but something flickered in his eyes, perhaps regret, perhaps just annoyance. He turned and walked away, his purple toga swirling in the dust. The crowd began to disperse. The show over. Some muttered about the injustice of a barbarian gaining citizenship. Others whispered about the eagle rider with something approaching awe. But Lyra paid them no attention. She was free, legally, officially free, and the weight of it was both liberating and terrifying. What will you do now? Lucius asked. Lyra looked at Gaius, who was being helped to his feet by some sympathetic observers. First, I'm going to ensure this man gets proper care. Then, she paused, looking north toward mountains she couldn't see but knew were there. Then, I need to find out if any of my people survived. There might be children, elderly, survivors scattered in the forests. That's dangerous territory now. The legions patrol constantly. I know, but I made a promise to someone that I would live, truly live. And for me, that means finding whatever family I might have left. I could help, Lucius offered. I have influence, resources. Why would you help me? Lucius was quiet for a moment, then said, because I've spent 2 years thinking about that day. You didn't just save my life. You showed me that enemies are often just people we haven't tried to understand. I want to be better than my father. I want to be someone who builds bridges, not burns them. The villa of Lucius Maximus stood on a hill overlooking Rome, its white columns gleaming in the morning sun. It had been 3 days since Lyra's liberation, and she still felt like a wild animal in a marble cage. The soft bed made her back ache, the rich food turned her stomach, and the silence, after years of chains clanking and slaves moaning, felt oppressive. She stood on the terrace, watching the city wake below, when Gaius shuffled out to join her. He moved slowly but steadily, the rest and proper food having given him strength. Nobody expected. You look like you're planning an escape, he observed, lowering himself carefully onto a bench. I'm not ungrateful, Lyra said quickly. Young Lucius has been more than generous, but you're a wolf being asked to be a lapdog, Gaius smiled. I understand. Have you decided when you'll leave? Tomorrow. Lucius has arranged papers for safe passage through Roman territories. He's also provided supplies. She hesitated. He insists on coming with me. Gaius raised an eyebrow. And you don't want him to. He means well, but he's Roman. My people, if any survive, won't trust him. They might not even trust me anymore. Dressed in Roman clothes, carrying Roman papers. Then why not go alone? Before Lyra could answer, Lucius emerged onto the terrace, dressed not in his usual toga, but in practical traveling clothes. Behind him walked a figure that made Lyra's hand instinctively reach for a weapon she no longer carried. Lyra, Lucius said carefully, this is Drusus. He was the centurion who led the attack on your village. The man was perhaps 40, scarred and weathered, with the bearing of a career soldier, but his eyes held something Lyra hadn't expected. Shame. Why? Was all Lyra managed to say, her voice dangerously quiet. Drusus met her gaze directly. The young master believes I might have information about survivors. He's right. He paused, then added, I've been drinking myself to death for 2 years, trying to forget what we did that day. When Lucius found me yesterday, I was ready to fall on my sword. Maybe you should have, Lyra said coldly. Maybe, Drusus agreed. But first, I need to tell you, there were survivors. We were ordered to kill everyone, but some of us, we couldn't kill the children. About 20 of them, and a few women who were with child. We let them flee into the Hercynian forest. Lyra's legs nearly gave out. She gripped the terrace railing, her knuckles white. 20 children, where? Which direction? Northeast, toward the old sacred groves. There was an old woman leading them, silver hair, walked with a staff. She was cursing us in your language as they ran. Grandmother Inge, Lyra breathed. She's the eldest of our clan, knew all the hidden paths. She turned to Drusus, hope and hatred warring in her eyes. Why should I believe you? Why would you disobey orders? Drusus looked away. I had a daughter once. Fever took her at the same age as some of those children. When I saw them crying for their parents, I couldn't. Neither could 3 of my men. We reported them killed, burned some animal corpses to fool the body count. Where are these other men? Dead. One fell in Germania, one to disease, one to his own hand, when the nightmares became too much. Lucius stepped forward. Drusus knows the patrol routes, the safe paths. He can get us through Roman lines without question. Us? Lyra turned to him. This isn't your fight, Lucius. It became my fight the day you saved my life. Please, let us help. Let me try to balance the scales, even a little. Gaius stood with difficulty. I'm coming too. Absolutely not, Lyra said immediately. You're too weak. I'm dying anyway, Gaius interrupted. Would you deny me the chance to do something meaningful with my last days? I was a scribe. I can document what we find, ensure the truth is recorded. Your people's stories deserve to be remembered correctly, not as Roman propaganda. Lyra looked at these 3 Romans, the idealistic youth, the haunted soldier, the dying scholar, and felt something shift in her chest. This is madness. We might find nothing but graves, or worse, we might find survivors who will kill you all on sight. Then we'll die trying to make amends, Lucius said simply. Isn't that better than living with dishonor? They set out at dawn, the next day, an unlikely group by any measure. Lyra had traded her Roman dress for practical travel clothes, but kept the citizenship papers hidden in her pack. Lucius brought medical supplies and gold for bribes. Drusus carried weapons and his intimate knowledge of patrol routes. Gaius, despite protests, rode a gentle mare, his writing supplies carefully packed in saddlebags. The first 3 days passed without incident. They traveled north, avoiding main roads, camping in hidden valleys Drusus knew from his campaigns. At night, around carefully concealed fires, and strange camaraderie began to form. Tell me about your brother, Lucius said on the 3rd night. Finn, you said his name was. Lyra stared into the flames for a long moment. He was gentler than me. While I learned to fight, he learned to create. He could carve animals so real you'd swear they would breathe. He was going to marry the blacksmith's daughter, Anya. They were so young, so full of plans. What happened to her? I don't know. I saw her father fall defending the forge, but I never found her body. Perhaps she's with the survivors, if Drusus speaks truth. Drusus, sitting apart from the others, spoke quiet. There was a young woman with the children, red hair, burn scars on her arms. She was carrying 2 small boys. Lyra's breath caught. Anya's hair was red. The blacksmith's daughter would have burned scars from the forge. She looked at Drusus with something almost like gratitude before catching herself. Why are you really doing this? Drusus was quiet for so long, they thought he wouldn't answer. Finally he said, because I haven't slept a full night since that day. Every time I close my eyes, I see your brother on that cross. He looked like my nephew. Same age, same stubborn jaw. I drove the nails myself, following orders like a good soldier. His voice broke. I need them to know someone tried to stop it, even if I failed. I need to tell them I'm sorry, even if it means nothing. Gaius, who had been documenting their journey, looked up from his writing. Sorrow means nothing without action. You're taking action now. Too little, too late, Drusus replied. Perhaps, Gaius agreed. But late is better than never. On the 5th day, They reached the edge of the Hercynian forest. The trees loomed dark and ancient, their branches so thick they blocked most of the sunlight. This was the boundary between Roman civilization and the wild lands, where old gods still held sway, and Roman laws meant nothing. "From here we go carefully," Drusus warned. "The patrols don't enter the deep forest, but there are worse things than soldiers in these woods." "Wolves?" Lucius asked nervously. "Survivors," Lyra corrected. "My people know these forests. If any lived, they'll have scouts watching. We're probably being observed right now." As if in response to her words, an arrow thudded into a tree, inches from Lucius's head. He froze, his hand halfway to his sword. "Don't move," Lyra commanded. Then, in her own language, she called out, "I am Lyra, daughter of Thorvald, granddaughter of Astrid the Wise. I seek the children of the Frostwolf clan." Silence answered her. Then, from the shadows between the trees, figures emerged. They were thin, dressed in rough furs and leather, their faces painted with mud and ash for camouflage. Their arrows were nocked and aimed at the Romans. One stepped forward, a woman of perhaps 30 winters, her red hair wild with twigs and leaves. Burn scars covered her arms. "Anya," Lyra whispered. The woman's eyes widened. "Lyra? But you were taken. We saw you in chains." "I was. I'm free now." Lyra took a step forward, hands raised peacefully. "These Romans helped me." Romans?" Anya's voice turned to ice. She focused on Drusus, and her face contorted with rage. "You, murderer, child killer." She raised her bow. "Wait." Lyra stepped between them. "Anya, please, let me explain. You bring the butcher of our people here. You betray us." Anya's arrow pointed now at Lyra. "They said you saved Romans. We didn't believe it. But here you are, dressed like them, speaking for them." "He let you escape," Lyra said urgently. "Drusus and his men, they let you and the children run. They disobeyed orders. After they killed everyone else." Anya's voice cracked. "After they crucified Finn." "I know," Lyra said softly. "I know, sister. But killing him now won't bring Finn back. And these others, this boy tried to make his father keep a promise of peace. This old man sacrificed everything to win my freedom. They're trying to help." "Help?" Anya laughed bitterly. "Where was help when the village burned? Where was help when the children cried for parents who would never answer?" An elderly voice called from the forest in their language. "Bring them. I would see Thorvald's daughter." The scouts kept their arrows aimed but gestured for the group to follow. They walked for an hour into the forest's heart until they reached a hidden settlement built into the trees themselves. Platforms, connected by rope bridges, invisible from the ground unless you knew where to look. Children peered down at them, their faces thin but alert. Lyra counted quickly, perhaps 15 young ones, a handful of women, and 3 elderly people. So few. Out of a village of 300, so few. On the largest platform sat Grandmother Inge, ancient beyond measure, but still sharp-eyed. She studied the group, her gaze lingering longest on Drusus. "I remember you, Roman," she said in accented Latin. "You stopped your men from pursuing us." "Why?" Drusus knelt, removing his helmet. "Because I remembered I was human before I was Roman, Elder. Too late, but I remembered. And now you come seeking what? Forgiveness? Absolution? No, Elder. I come to offer what aid I can. Information, supplies, safe passage if you need it. I know I can never atone, but I can try to help." Grandmother Inge turned to Lyra. "And you, child? You bring Romans to our last refuge. I bring complicated allies, Grandmother. The world isn't as simple as we once believed. There's evil in Rome, yes, but also those who would do good. Young Lucius here would work for peace. The scholar Gaius would record our true stories, not Roman lies. Even Drusus is haunted by what he's done. Perhaps that haunting can be turned to purpose." The old woman was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "What of the gold you hid? Did the Romans find it?" "They did, but there's more. In 2 other locations. Enough to buy land, to start again somewhere safe." "Nowhere is safe from Rome," Anya said bitterly. "Perhaps not." Lucius spoke for the first time. "But there are places Rome protects rather than conquers. Allied territories where you could live under your own laws, keep your own customs. I have influence enough to arrange such a thing. Why would you help us?" Grandmother Inge asked. "Because Lyra saved my life when she had every reason to let me die. Because my father broke his word and stained our family's honor." Because he paused, looking at the thin faces of the children watching from above. "Because I don't want to grow old knowing I could have helped but didn't." The night fell heavy with unspoken tensions. The survivors had allowed the Romans to stay, but under guard, confined to a single platform at the settlement's edge. Lyra moved between both groups, belonging fully to neither, trusted completely by none. She found Gaius writing by candlelight, his frail hand moving steadily across parchment, despite the tremor in his fingers. "What are you documenting now?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Their stories," he replied, without looking up. "Young Eric, yes, the same boy from the cells, he's here, told me about the night of the attack, how his mother hid him in a root cellar, how he heard everything but could see nothing. These stories need to be preserved." "Why?" "So Rome can catalogue its conquests." Gaius finally looked at her, and she was surprised to see tears on his weathered cheeks. "So that someone, someday, might learn from our cruelty. So that these children aren't just numbers in a military report." He coughed, blood speckling his lips. "I'm dying faster than I thought, perhaps weeks now, not months. I want to use that time to ensure their voices are heard." From across the platform, Drusser sat rigidly, staring into the darkness. He hadn't eaten since they arrived, hadn't spoken except when directly questioned. Lyra approached him cautiously. "You should eat. I sat at a feast the night after the attack," he said hollowly, "celebrating our victory. How can I eat here, among the ghosts of those I killed? Starving yourself won't resurrect them. Nothing will." He finally looked at her, and she saw a broken man behind the soldier's facade. "Do you know what your brother said as he died?" Lyra's breath caught. "Don't," he said. "Tell Lyra the wolves will sing her home." "I didn't understand then. I do now. He meant you'd return, that you'd find the survivors." Drusus pulled something from his pack, a small wooden carving of a wolf, intricate and beautiful. "I took this from his body. I don't know why. Perhaps I knew even then that I'd need to return it." Lyra took the carving with shaking hands. It was Finn's work. She recognized every cut, every detail. The wolf seemed alive in the flickering candlelight, ready to howl at any moment. A commotion from the main platform interrupted them. Anya's voice rose in anger, followed by Grandmother Inge's calmer tone. Lyra hurried across the rope bridges, the Romans following despite the guards' protests. In the center of the main platform, Anya stood with a knife to her own throat. "I won't live in their world," she was declaring. "I won't take their charity, their guilt gold. Better to die free than live as their pet survivors." "Anya, please," Grandmother Inge said calmly. "The children need you. The children need a future, not a slow death by Roman kindness." Anya's eyes were wild with grief and rage. "They killed my father, my intended husband, everyone I loved, except these few. And now we should trust them, follow them to some safe place that Rome allows. We'll be curiosities, relics, the last of the barbarians kept like animals in a menagerie." "You're right," Lyra said, stepping into the circle of light. Everyone turned to her. "You're absolutely right, Anya. Taking their help might mean losing who we are. But dying here, in hiding, letting our language and stories fade into nothing, is that better? At least we die as ourselves. Would we look at the children, Anya? Really look at them?" Everyone turned to where the young ones huddled. They were thin, frightened, many bearing scars from that terrible night. But in their eyes was something else. Curiosity about the strangers. Hope for something beyond hiding and hunger. They don't remember the homeland clearly, Lyra continued. They know only fear and forest shadows. Is that the legacy we want? For the Frostwolf clan to end as frightened prey? Better than lapdogs. Then let's be neither. Lyra stepped closer to Anya, careful not to threaten. Let's be what we've always been. Survivors who adapt. We learned to farm when the hunting grew scarce. We learned to trade when fighting brought only death. Now we must learn to live alongside those who were enemies. Not as subjects, but as equals. Equals? Anya laughed bitterly. They hold all the power. Do they? Lyra turned to address everyone. Lucius, tell them what you told me about the Senate's current situation. Lucius stepped forward nervously. The Senate is divided. Many believe the northern campaigns were too costly, too brutal. There's a growing faction that wants to try integration rather than extermination. They need a success story, proof that peace is possible. So, we'd be their experiment. Anya demanded. You'd be partners in creating something new, Lucius said. Yes, it serves Rome's purposes, but it also ensures your survival. You don't, Lyra admitted. Just as we don't know if Rome will honor any agreement we make. Trust is not given, General. It's built, stone by stone, choice by choice. Father, Lucius interjected, the Senate is already questioning the cost of these campaigns. Senator Aurelius leads a faction that believes integration serves Rome better than extermination. Bring him a success here, and you secure your political future while saving lives. The general's laugh was bitter. You learned politics well, my son, too well. He turned to address the survivors. You would truly accept Roman law, Roman customs, alongside your own? Grandmother Inge shuffled forward, leaning heavily on her staff. We accept survival, Roman. Your law, our traditions, woven together like a strong rope. Each strand supports the other, and if elements of my legion refuse, many lost brothers in the northern campaigns, the hatred runs deep. As it does with us, Anya spoke, her voice sharp with controlled rage. You think I don't dream of slitting Roman throats? You think I don't see my father's death every time I close my eyes? But I see these children more clearly. They deserve a future beyond blood and ashes. The general studied her, this fierce woman, who radiated barely contained violence. You would be the one most likely to break such a peace. Yes, Anya agreed simply. Which is why I offer myself as hostage. Keep me in Rome. Guarantee my people's safety. And I guarantee their cooperation. No, Eric cried out, but Anya silenced him with a gesture. It's logical, she continued. I'm the one most likely to lead a revolt. Remove me and peace has a chance. Anya, you can't, Lyra began. I can, I must. Anya's eyes never left the general's. But I have conditions. I live as a free woman in Rome, not a slave. I learn Roman fighting techniques, Roman law. When peace is established, I return to teach our people how to defend themselves within Roman structure. The general considered this. You would trust Romans to keep such a bargain? I trust that boy. She pointed at Lucius, because he defied you for principle. I trust that broken soldier, she indicated Drusus, because he offered his life for his crimes. I don't trust you, General, but I trust that you love your son enough to not make him a liar. Marta, who had been standing quietly beside the general's horse, tugged on his cloak. Please, grandfather who isn't yet. Let us try. Trying is better than dying. The word grandfather rippled through the Roman ranks. Soldiers exchanged glances. Their iron general being called grandfather by a barbarian child was beyond comprehension. The general looked down at the child, then at his son, then at the wooden wolf in his hand. The moment stretched like a held breath. Finally he spoke. Centurion Drusus. Drusus snapped to attention despite having no weapons. Sir, you will take a century of men. You will escort these people to the settlement lands near Ravenna. You will ensure their safety and begin integration protocols. Sir. Yes, sir. Lucius. His son straightened. Father, you will return to Rome immediately. Present Gaius's documents to Senator Aurelius. Frame this as a triumph of Roman diplomacy. Make the Senate believe this was their idea. And you, I will handle the legions. Many won't understand. Some will call it weakness. His jaw tightened. Let them. I've been called worse. He turned to Lyra. You, Eagle Rider, you will be official liaison between your people and Rome. The Senate will likely grant you citizenship for your service to Roman citizens. Use it wisely. And my people's autonomy, governed by Roman law but maintaining cultural practices that don't conflict with it. Your own judges for minor disputes. Roman oversight for major ones. It's the best I can offer. It's enough to begin, Grandmother Ingi said before Lyra could respond. Beginning is all we ask. The general mounted his horse, then paused. He looked at little Marta, still standing fearlessly among the Romans. Child, Marta, the wolf carving. I'll keep it if I may. She nodded solemnly. It will protect you from sad dreams. Finn's wolves are magic that way. Something that might have been a smile ghosted across the general's face. Then I'll treasure it. He raised his voice to address his legions. About face. We returned to camp. The synchronized movement of 3,000 soldiers turning made the earth tremble. But they turned away from the survivors, away from slaughter, toward something uncertain but bloodless. As the legions marched away, Lyra felt her knees buckle. The weight of what had just happened, what had almost happened, crashed over her like a wave. Lucius caught her before she fell. You did it, he whispered. You faced down 3 legions with flowers and children's songs. We all did it, she corrected. Roman and tribesmen together. Drusus was already organizing, his military efficiency replacing his earlier broken demeanor. We need to move quickly. The general gave orders, but some soldiers might act independently. We traveled through the night, reached Ravenna in 3 days. They returned to the forest settlement to gather the others and their meager possessions. The survivors who had fled deeper into the forest emerged, hardly believing the news. It's a trick, one man insisted. Romans don't make peace, they make subjects. Then we'll be the freest subjects in the empire. Lyra replied. It's not perfect, but it's life. Our children will grow up, our language will be spoken. Our stories will continue. That night, as they prepared for the journey, Eric approached Lyra. Will we really be safe? Will they really let us live as ourselves? I don't know, she admitted, but Gaius died believing it possible. Your mother died fighting for your chance at life. Now we must live to honor their sacrifice. I'm scared, so am I, little warrior. But fear and courage aren't opposites. They're partners. One cannot exist without the other. The journey to Ravenna tested everyone. They traveled at night to avoid regular patrols who might not have received word of the general's orders. Days were spent hidden in valleys and groves. The children kept quiet with stories and songs whispered rather than sung. On the second night, they encountered a Roman patrol that hadn't received word. 20 soldiers, drunk on wine and bloodlust, looking for any remaining barbarians to claim as trophies. Well, their leader sneered, seeing the mixed group, traitors and savages together. This will be fun. Drusus stepped forward, every inch the centurion despite his lack of weapons. I carry orders from General Maximus himself. These people are under protection. Maximus isn't here, traitor. And dead barbarians tell no tales. The soldiers advanced, swords drawn. The children whimpered, pressing close to their guardians. This was it, the fear made real, the proof that peace was impossible. Then Lucius did something unexpected. He stepped forward, not with weapon or threat, but with his seal of office. I am Lucius Maximus, son of the general, voice of the Senate in this matter. Kill them and you kill me. Return to your posts, and I forget I saw you here. You die for barbarians. I die for Rome's honor. The question is whether you'll kill for your dishonor. The patrol leader hesitated. Killing barbarians was one thing, but the general's son, that was execution for him and his men. Anya chose that moment to act. Moving faster than thought, she had taken a soldier's sword and held it to her own throat. Or we make this simple. You kill us all, claim we attacked. But know that our ghosts will haunt your every step. In your wine you'll taste blood. In your bread, ash. Every child's cry will sound like those you murdered. That's superstition, the patrol leader said, but several of his men stepped back, making signs against evil. Is it? Grandmother Ing stepped forward, her ancient voice carrying power beyond her frail frame. I am the last keeper of the old words, the curse speaker of the Frost Wolf clan. Shall I show you what barbarian magic can do to murderers' souls? She began to chant in the old language, her voice rising and falling in patterns that seemed to make the very air thick. The Roman soldiers, raised on stories of barbarian witches, felt their courage waver. Leave, Drusus commanded, seeing his opportunity. Leave now, and nothing follows you. Stay, and carry cursed blood forever. The patrol broke. They fled into the night, discipline forgotten in the face of primal fear. Only their leader remained, hatred warring with terror on his face. This isn't over, he spat. You can't protect them forever. I can try, Drusus replied, and that's more than you'll ever do. After the patrol left, Anya dropped the sword, her hands shaking. I thought we were dead. Your performance was perfect, Lyra said, though I wonder what Grandmother Inja was actually saying. The old woman cackled. A recipe for rabbit stew. But Romans don't speak our language, and fear fills in what understanding lacks. Despite the moment of levity, the encounter sobered them. If soldiers close to the general's command could threaten them, what waited in Ravenna? They found out the next morning when they crested the final hill. The settlement lands spread before them, fertile fields, a clean river, existing buildings that could be repaired, but surrounding it were hundreds of Romans, some in military uniform, others clearly civilians. It's a trap, Anya hissed, reaching for a weapon she didn't have. But then they saw the signs the crowd carried, not weapons but tools, hammers, saws, farming implements, and at their head. Welcome, the senator called out, his voice carrying across the distance. General Maximus sent word. These citizens have volunteered to help you build your new homes. Consider it Rome's first payment on a debt too large to ever fully repay. Lyra couldn't speak. Romans, ordinary Romans, had come to help. It seemed impossible, yet here they stood. A Roman woman stepped forward, middle-aged and kind-faced. I lost my son in Germania, she said simply. I could let hatred consume me, or I could help other mothers' children survive. I choose to build one by one. Romans stepped forward with similar stories. Sons lost to war, brothers dead in distant lands, fathers who never returned. They offered not forgiveness. That was too much to ask, but cooperation. A chance to end the cycle. Why? Lyra finally managed to ask. Senator Aurelius answered, because Gaius's testament has been read in the Senate. The truth of what was done in your lands. It shames true Romans. This is not conquest, it's correction. Small, perhaps insufficient, but necessary. 3 months had passed since their arrival in Ravenna. The settlement had transformed from empty fields and broken buildings into something neither fully Roman nor fully tribal, something entirely new. Lyra stood on the hill, overlooking their small community, watching Romans and her people working side by side to raise the frame of a new longhouse. The design was tribal, but Roman engineering made it stronger. Children ran between the workers, no longer distinguishing between Roman and barbarian playmates. You're thinking too hard again, Anya said, approaching with 2 cups of heated wine, a Roman custom they'd adopted for the cooling weather. I'm thinking about Finn, Lyra admitted. What he would make of all this. He'd be proud. You know he would. He always said you'd change the world, just not with a sword. They stood in comfortable silence, watching Eric teaching a Roman boy named Marcus, named after the general, ironically, how to carve wood in the tribal style. The boys laughed when Marcus's wolf looked more like a misshapen dog. Drusus wants to speak with you, Anya said eventually. He's in the council hall with visitors from Rome. Lyra found Drusus in the building that served as their meeting place, another hybrid, with Roman columns but a tribal roof design. With him were 3 senators, their togas marking them as men of importance. They want to make an example of us, Drusus said without preamble. Show the Senate that integration works. Meaning? Lyra asked. One senator, a younger man named Cassius, spoke up. There are other tribes, other survivors, hiding in forests and mountains. If they see your success, they might choose peace over continued resistance. You want us to be your propaganda. We want you to be proof that Rome can be more than conquest. Cassius corrected. General Maximus has been surprisingly vocal in the Senate about this experiment. His testimony, combined with Gaius's documents, has shifted opinions. The general supports us. Lyra couldn't hide her surprise. He carries that wooden wolf everywhere. Another senator said, shows it to anyone who argues against the settlement. Says it reminds him that art and beauty exist even in those we call enemies. Lyra felt something shift in her chest. Not quite forgiveness, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. What do you need from us? She asked. A delegation to Rome. Show the Senate who you really are. Let them see barbarian children, learning Latin, Roman children, learning your songs. Make them understand what they nearly destroyed. It's dangerous, Drusus warned. Not everyone in Rome supports this. There are those who would see you dead just to prove integration impossible. When would we go? Next month, before the winter festivals. It would be symbolic, the season of peace and reconciliation. Lyra looked at Drusus, who nodded slightly. His judgment on Roman politics had proven sound. I'll discuss it with the council, she said. The council, another innovation, with equal numbers of Romans and tribespeople making decisions together. That evening, the debate was fierce. Many feared a trap. Others saw opportunity. It was Grandmother Ings who ended the discussion. I will go, she announced, though she could barely walk now, winter having settled deep in her bones. If an old barbarian woman can face the Roman Senate without fear, what excuse do younger ones have? It's too dangerous for you, Lyra protested. Child, I'm dying anyway. My bones tell me this is my last winter. Let me use it to secure my people's future. The delegation was chosen. Lyra, Grandmother Ings, Anya, Eric, little Marta, and 3 other children who had shown remarkable ability to bridge both cultures. Drusus would accompany them as military escort, along with Lucius, who had returned from Rome with news that his father had indeed been advocating for them. The night before departure, they held a feast, combining Roman and tribal traditions. The food was Roman style, but seasoned with tribal herbs. The entertainment included both Roman poetry and tribal songs. At the height of the celebration, Eric stood and announced he had something to share. The boy, now nearly 11, had grown confident in these months of peace. He pulled out a carved wooden piece, not a wolf, but something new. This is an eagle and a wolf, together, he said, showing the intricate carving where the 2 animals seemed to dance around each other, not fighting, but playing. I made it for General Maximus. Why? Someone asked. He ordered your mother's death. Eric was quiet for a moment, because Lyra taught me that hatred is heavy. I'm tired of carrying it. I want to carry hope instead. The room fell silent. This boy who had lost everything was choosing to create rather than destroy. If he could do that, what excuse did anyone else have? They left at dawn, taking Roman roads that Lyra had once watched from a cage. Now she rode freely, though the weight of responsibility was its own kind of chain. The journey took 5 days, and with each mile closer to Rome, the tension grew. On the final night before entering the city, they camped by a stream. Grandmother Ings was struggling, each breath labored, but she refused to turn back. I need to tell you something, she said to Lyra privately, a secret I've carried since that night. What secret? Your mother didn't die in the attack. She was taken, sold to Eastern traders. I heard this from a Roman soldier. As he died, he thought it would hurt me to know we'd failed to protect her. Lyra felt the world tilt. My mother might be alive, might or might have died in slavery, but I thought you should know, should have the choice to search or let go. Why didn't you tell me before? Because you needed to be strong for others. Personal quests make us selfish, but now with peace establishing, you can choose your own path. Lyra's mind reeled, but there was no time to process. Rome awaited. They entered the city through the Triumph Gate, typically reserved for victorious generals. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Crowds lined the streets, some curious, some hostile, many simply stunned to see barbarians walking freely through Rome. Someone threw a stone that caught Eric's shoulder. He didn't flinch, didn't respond, just kept walking with his carved eagle wolf held high. His dignity shamed the attacker more than any retaliation could have. The Senate building loomed before them, marble and might made manifest. Inside, 300 of Rome's most powerful men waited to judge whether barbarians could truly become Roman. General Maximus stood at the center, and Lyra was shocked at the change in him. He seemed older, worn, but also somehow lighter. The wooden wolf carving hung from a cord around his neck, a barbarian talisman on a Roman general. Senators, he began, his voice carrying the authority of decades of command. You see before you not conquered enemies, but future citizens, not barbarians but bridge builders. I stand here to tell you that I was wrong. Conquest without compassion is not strength, it's waste. The Senate erupted in discussion, but Maximus raised his hand for silence. Let them speak for themselves, he said. Grandmother Ings stepped forward, aided by Eric. Her voice, though weak, filled the chamber with surprising power. Romans, she began, you call us barbarians, but we had laws when Rome was mud huts. You call us savage, but we created art that moves even your hardest hearts. You conquered our bodies, but not our spirits. Now we offer you something greater than submission, partnership. She gestured to the children. These young ones learn Latin and keep our tongue. They know Roman law and tribal custom. They are not half Roman, half barbarian. They are fully both. They are the future, if you have wisdom to see it. A senator stood, his face red with anger. You murdered our soldiers. You resisted civilization. We defended our homes. Anya responded, stepping forward, as you would defend Rome. But that's past. I lost my father, my husband-to-be. Young Marcus here, she indicated a Roman boy who had come with them. One who had been learning their ways, lost his father in our lands. Yet yesterday, I taught him to track deer, and he taught me to read Latin. Which of us is barbarian now? The debate raged for hours. Some senators called for immediate citizenship for the settlement. Others demanded they be dispersed, their culture dissolved into Roman society. Then little Marta did what she did best. She walked where warriors feared to tread. She approached the angriest senator, the one calling loudest for their dissolution, and held up a small woven bracelet. For you, she said simply. I made it, Roman colors, tribal patterns, like us. The senator, a grandfather himself, took the bracelet with shaking hands. Why give this to me? I speak against you. Because angry people are just sad people being loud. My mama told me that before she died. The Senate fell silent. This tiny child had just reduced their grand debate to its simplest truth. They were all just hurt. People trying to find a way forward. Lucius seized the moment. Senators, I propose a vote. Grant the Ravenna settlement full autonomous citizenship. Let them be the model for peaceful integration. If it fails, we lose nothing but a small piece of land. If it succeeds, we gain a blueprint for ending the frontier wars that drain our treasury and our youth. The vote was closer than hoped, but decisive enough. The settlement would be recognized, its people citizens, their customs protected under Roman law. As they prepared to leave, General Maximus approached Lyra privately. "The boy's carving," he said, indicating Eric's eagle wolf. "I'll treasure it as I do his brother's wolf." "Finn would have forgiven you," Lyra said, surprising herself. "He always said hatred was wasted energy, better spent on creating. I don't deserve forgiveness. No one deserves it. That's why it's powerful when given." The general studied her for a long moment. "Your mother? I've had men search. No confirmed information, but rumors of a northern woman sold to Greeks, then freed for healing their merchant son. She might be in Alexandria." Lyra's heart raced. "Why would you search?" "Because a man trying to rebuild his honor starts by undoing his wrongs, where possible." He handed her a sealed letter. "This grants you safe passage through all Roman territories, should you choose to search." The journey back to Ravenna was subdued. Despite their victory, Grandmother Inja grew weaker with each mile, and they had to stop frequently to let her rest. On the third night, as they camped beside an ancient oak, she called Lyra to her side. "My time is here," she said simply. "I've seen our people safe, seen them become something new. It's enough." "No," Lyra protested. "We're almost home. Just 2 more days. Child, I am home, under stars, beneath beats, surrounded by my people. What more could I ask?" She gripped Lyra's hand with surprising strength. "Promise me something, anything. Find your mother, not for revenge or even reunion, but to close the circle. And when you find her, tell her the Frostwolf clan lives on, changed but unbroken." That night, as the fire burned low, Grandmother Inge began to tell one last story. Not of heroes or battles, but of ordinary people choosing extraordinary kindness. She spoke of the Roman woman who had lost her son but came to help build homes, of Drusus, who transformed from killer to protector, of little Marta, whose innocent wisdom shamed senators. "This is the greatest story," she said, her voice growing faint. "Not that enemies became friends, but that they chose to try." She died as dawn touched the sky, peacefully surrounded by Romans and tribespeople alike. They buried her beneath the oak, using both traditions. Drusus and his men stood at attention as Eric sang the death song. Roman and tribal tears mingled in the earth. When they finally returned to Ravenna, they found the settlement transformed yet again. News of their success in Rome had traveled fast. 3 other tribal groups had sent representatives, wanting to understand how peace had been achieved. More surprisingly, a delegation of Roman mothers had arrived, women who had lost sons in the frontier wars and wanted to ensure no more died. But the most shocking visitor waited in Lyra's dwelling. The woman was perhaps 50, her once golden hair now silver, her face marked by years of hardship. But her eyes, ice blue, fierce, unmistakable. "Mother," Lyra whispered. Astrid stood slowly, as if afraid sudden movement would shatter the moment. "My brave girl, my fierce little wolf." They collapsed into each other's arms, years of separation dissolving in tears and broken words. When they finally pulled apart, Lyra saw that her mother walked with a limp, her left arm clearly weakened. "The Romans?" Lyra asked. "No, the slavers. I fought too hard, so they broke what they could. But they couldn't break my spirit, just as they couldn't break yours." "How did you find me?" "General Maximus. He sent men to Alexandria, where I was working as a healer. When they said the Eagle Rider sought her mother, I knew my daughter had survived and done something extraordinary." They talked through the night. Astrid told of her years in slavery, eventual freedom earned through healing skills. Her life in Alexandria, always wondering about her children. Lyra told of Finn's death, the survival of some clan members, the impossible peace they were building. "And Finn?" Astrid asked, though her eyes said she already knew. "He died bravely, protecting Mother's grave from desecration. His last words were of you." Astrid wept then, the controlled grief of years flooding out. "My gentle boy, he was never meant for war. None of us were. But we adapted. We survived. Now we're trying to live. The next morning Astrid met the settlement. The survivors who remembered her fell to their knees, but she raised them up. We kneel to no one now, she said. We stand as equals or not at all. She met Drusus, who couldn't look her in the eye. You killed my son, she said simply. Yes, you saved my daughter's people. I tried. Then we are neither even nor enemies. We are two people damaged by the same war, trying to heal. Can you accept that? Drusus nodded, unable to speak. Life in the settlement continued. Astrid established a healing house, teaching both Roman and tribal medicine. Eric's talent for carving grew, and he began teaching other children. Marta became everyone's granddaughter, bridging gaps with her innocent wisdom. But it was Anya who surprised everyone most. 6 months after the Senate vote, she announced she was marrying Marcus, not the boy, but the Roman soldier who had helped build the first houses. He had lost his family to tribal raids years ago. She had lost hers to Roman attacks. Together they decided to build something new. The wedding was unprecedented. Roman customs and tribal traditions woven together into something beautiful and strange. General Maximus himself attended, giving his blessing to this union that would have been unthinkable a year ago. At the feast, Lyra stood to speak. A year ago I stood in chains in a Roman market. I was nothing, property to be sold, barbarian to be mocked. Today I stand as a citizen, a bridge builder, a keeper of peace between peoples. This isn't the life I expected. It's harder than warfare because it requires us to see enemies as people, to choose understanding over hatred every single day. She looked at each face, Roman and tribal, young and old, former enemies now building a shared future. We've lost so much, people we loved, homes we cherished, the simple certainty of us versus them. But we've gained something precious, the knowledge that change is possible, that cycles can be broken, that children don't have to inherit their parents' hatred. Eric stood then, holding a new carving. This one showed not animals but people, Romans and tribespeople working together, children playing, elderly sharing stories. It was the settlement itself, carved in wood, made eternal. This is for the Great Hall, he announced. So our children's children will remember not the conquest or the resistance, but the choosing. The day we chose to try. 5 years passed. The settlement grew into a town, the town into a model repeated across the frontier. Not every attempt succeeded. Some settlements failed, some erupted in violence, but more succeeded than failed, and slowly, painfully, the bleeding borders of empire began to heal. Lyra stood in the same spot where she had once overlooked their first build. The years passed. Lyra eventually stepped down from leadership, passing it to Eric and Marta together. The boy who had survived the cells and the girl who had called a general grandfather. They led differently than she had, with less weight of the past, more hope for the future. Anya had 3 children with Marcus, raising them to be equally fierce and thoughtful. She taught them to fight and to question why fighting might be necessary. They grew up not choosing between Roman and tribal, but being fully both. Drusus never married, dedicating his life to protecting the settlement. He trained young people in defense, but also in restraint. His greatest pride was a decade without a single death from conflict in their territory. Astrid lived longer than anyone expected, becoming the settlement's memory keeper. She collected stories from both sides, weaving them into a narrative that acknowledged pain without wallowing, celebrated survival without glorifying suffering. And Lyra, she traveled with the freedom her citizenship granted. She visited other settlements, other attempts at peace. Some she helped succeed, others she could only watch fail. But she never stopped trying, never stopped believing that bridges could be built even across the deepest chasms. 20 years after that day in the slave market, Lyra stood again on a platform. Not in chains this time, but as a speaker at the dedication of the Peace Memorial, a monument to all who died in the frontier wars, Roman and tribal alike. The crowd was massive, thousands upon thousands. Romans who had lost sons, tribespeople who had lost everything, and increasingly, people who were both and neither, the new generation born from the bridges built. I was asked to speak of triumph. Lyra began, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. But there is no triumph in what we've built. Triumph implies someone won. No one won. We all lost people we loved. Innocence we cherished. Simplicity we miss. What we have isn't triumph, it's transformation. She looked at the faces before her. Eric, now a master carver, whose work decorated temples and longhouses alike. Marta, who had become a senator, the first of tribal blood. Anya's children, who moved seamlessly between worlds. Her mother, ancient now, but still bright-eyed, surrounded by students learning the healing arts. I stood in chains and declared I would buy an old man's freedom. They laughed, because a slave owning a slave was absurd. But the absurd became possible. The impossible became real, not through strength or conquest, but through the simple, radical act of seeing enemies as people. She pulled out a small wooden wolf, not Finn's but one carved by a Roman child who had learned from Eric, who had learned from Finn's memory. My brother died for refusing to let Romans desecrate our mother's grave. General Maximus died carrying my brother's art against his heart. These deaths shaped us, broke us, but also built us into something new. We are not Romans. We are not barbarians. We are the children of both, the bridges between, the proof that hatred is learned and can be unlearned. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. Somewhere in the crowd, someone began to sing, the old song, the one Lyra had sung in the market, the one Finn had sung on the cross, the one that had become the anthem of transformation. One voice became 10, became 100, became 1,000. Romans singing in the tribal tongue, tribespeople singing words they'd learned from former enemies. The song rose into the darkening sky like a prayer, like a promise, like hope given voice. As the last notes faded, Lyra spoke once more. We cannot resurrect the dead. We cannot undo the pain. But we can choose what grows from the ashes. We chose connection over isolation, understanding over hatred, complex peace over simple war. This is our legacy, not that we forgot the past, but that we refuse to let it define our future. She stepped down from the platform and walked into the crowd, not as leader or symbol, but as one among many, the woman who had been nothing, who had been property, who had been mocked and chained, now stood free among free people, not because she had conquered, but because she had chosen to build. As night fell, bonfires were lit, a tribal tradition adopted by Romans. Stories were shared, songs sung, children played between the legs of adults who had once been enemies. It wasn't perfect, it would never be perfect, but it was real, and it was theirs, and it was enough. In the firelight, a young girl approached Lyra, another orphan, another survivor, another bridge waiting to be built. Tell me the story, the girl asked. Tell me how the barbarian slave saved everyone. Lyra smiled, that gap-toothed grin that had never been fixed, that reminded her of who she was and where she came from. I didn't save anyone, she said, pulling the child close. We saved each other, and the story isn't over. You're part of it now. What chapter will you write? The girl thought seriously, then said, a happy one, with families and songs and no one calling anyone barbarian. Then that's the chapter we'll build together. As the fires burned low and the crowd dispersed to homes that were neither Roman nor tribal, but something wonderfully new, Lyra looked up at the stars. The same stars that had watched her village burn, that had witnessed her chains, that had seen the impossible become possible. Thank you, Finn, she whispered. Thank you for the wolves that sang us home. And somewhere in the wind, in the crackle of fires, in the laughter of children who would never know the weight of inherited hatred, she could swear she heard her brother's voice. You were always meant to build bridges, sister. I just had to die for you to see it. She wept then, not from grief, but from gratitude, for the peace built on pain, for the love grown from loss, for the future that rose from the ashes of a past that nearly destroyed them all. The settlement slept peacefully that night, Romans and tribespeople alike, their dreams no longer of conquest or resistance, but of tomorrow's possibilities. Children curled against parents who had chosen love over loyalty to hate. Former enemies shared meals and memories, and in the center of it all, a wooden carving stood in the great hall, Eric's masterpiece, showing the moment when a barbarian slave declared she would buy a Roman's freedom, when the impossible became inevitable, when the world changed not through swords, but through the simple revolutionary act of seeing enemies as people worthy of salvation. The story would be told for generations, how they laughed at the barbarian slave until she showed them that strength wasn't in conquest, but in compassion. How she bought not just one man's freedom, but the possibility of a future where Roman and barbarian were meaningless words, replaced by a simple, powerful truth. We are all human, we all suffer, and we all have the choice to heal together or bleed alone. They chose to heal, and in that choosing, they changed the world.